I just wanted to really kind of get the energy up and get everyone going before we go into these really important and meaningful discussions that we're about to have with our elected officials with us here today. So I'm going to kick us off with some rhymes. If at any point you're feeling something you hear, or you're just liking things that are coming out of my mouth, go ahead and just go off in the chat. The Zoom life is such a strange world for artists because we're so used to energy in the room, and positive affirmations in the chat is probably the closest we're gonna get to it on the Zoom performance. So I'm gonna start us off with some rhymes. Goes a little something like this. So you get addicted to winning when systems you live in designed for your people to fail. I gotta keep rising above it. There's no way to stop it unless you can send me to hell. This ain't a game for me. Funny, they came for me. They got no bars. I posted a bell. Ending in sight for me, sending the light in me till I'm the favorite legend they tell. She said, I know you're getting older, still too young to quit your dreams though. Air your dirty laundry, but remember you got clean clothes. I hate your smiles changing, see it curving like a tombstone. It used to be a bird's nest. I think it's time to fly home. Last night, she told me don't die yet. There's so much to do, just fight it. She called me a captain, never been a pilot. What good is the plane I'm on if I crash it? Still, I got so much to tell. Dropping my bucket list deep in the well, pulling out wishes like books on the shelves, and you might call them stories. I call it my health. I didn't come this far just to get this far. We did not come this far just to get this far. But I promise, this is more than ego. See, struggle is my truth. There is no separating either. My parents came from poverty. I'm not trying to be no sire. Forget your crown, forget your ring, forget your cash, forget your bling. I think I would rather just be that rebel protesting at your feet just like my pops. When Ferdinand Marcos ruled the Philippines, I still believe in people power because there's power when we speak. So I stay afloat by slitting pages from my throat. Never sink when ink hardens hungry hearts into a boat. But what kind of man am I to say I'm repping for my region? A citizen always skipping Sunday service on the weekend, taking classes from my masters, drinking with some bastards, fighting in self-defense and laughing at all them suckers after. See, that's the life I lead. That's the truth I see. And so I often question why my fans follow me. I guess these people know I flow and I go deeper with my metaphors. I got more proof than labels in your liquor stores. Take a shot or two if people take a shot at you. I learn how to take my shots up on the block with my crew first. Take a shot of your drink, but watch the shot from someone's fist. I'm glad we stuck to knuckles and bats, rarely strapped, emptying clips. The North is where I'm from, but the people is what I love. And how could I hope to teach if both my hands are dripping with blood? So I stopped that. I dropped back. I went to class. I chose to rap. I put knowledge down on a track and I hope that the kids react with claps. These ego-tripping rappers still trying to prove wits. I teach at public schools trying to improve kids. It's funny how I hated school and now I'm teaching at a school. It's hard to punish students when I see them breaking all these rules because growing up, I was just like them, pissing teachers off and scrapping in the streets of my friends. But I'm older now, so I guess that means I'm smarter. Helping kids up through the system is practice for when I'm a father. I teach my students if they wanted, they could walk far, but there ain't no leg room riding in a cop car. Yes, and that is how I'm kicking us off. If you liked any of that, go ahead and just sound off in the chat. Yay, yay, yay. Thank y'all so much. I saw the chat going up and I was like, yeah, they're liking it. Thank goodness. Word, thank you so much. So as part of my features, I usually, perform and give a little bit of a talk in the middle of things just to help frame where I'm coming from and maybe add a little bit of flavor to the larger discussions that are about to happen. So I wanted to talk a little bit about my journey as an artist, right? In the time of COVID-19, like this is wild times for so many of us. And artists are just going through it, y'all. This is a tough time to be an artist, with the pandemic, with the shutdown, with everything that's going on. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that. As Kevin mentioned, I was born and raised on the beautiful Pacific island of Guam. I moved to Denver, Colorado about 4 years ago. And since then, I hit the ground running as an artist. The first year was tough, but I eventually found a way to balance my life as a full-time artist and as a part-time educator. I have a bachelor's degree in English Lit. I have a master's in teaching. So I eventually found my way to a teaching position at a halfway house in Lakewood, Colorado. For those of you who are unfamiliar, a halfway house, there's no real good way to describe what halfway houses are, I guess, but in a nutshell, they're rehabilitation facilities where individuals are sort of getting their lives back together in hopes of becoming more productive members of society again, right? And in the particular halfway house that I worked in was an all-male facility, and all of the residents were released prisoners, either fulfilling the rest of their sentence out or on probation. So I was working there part-time, helping our guys get their GEDs, and helping them land jobs, coaching them through the interview process. If you don't know, it's extremely difficult to land any type of job with anything on your record, right? So, these men who are trying to get their lives back together had to pay rent at this halfway house facility. But there was an extensive process to even land a job at all. So that was my part-time gig. And then as a full-time artist, I was able to tour. I actually, pretty much the whole time I've been here, I've had more out-of-state shows than I've had in-state shows, which is always weird. But I was touring. I was doing a lot of university gigs, keynote addresses at different colleges, universities, headlining at different artistic events. Chris, yes, that's exactly the spot. And yeah, so I was able to balance my life as an artist and as an educator. And I got to learn a lot about the system and the holes in the system, and the different pitfalls of a rehabilitation system, like up close, because I was in it. And then the pandemic hit. I was coming back from my birthday celebration in Honolulu, Hawaii. And I got back in March. I got off the plane. I got picked up at the airport earlier this year in March. And the first thing my brother talked about was the pandemic and how we're probably looking at shutdowns very soon. And at this point, as an artist and as a part-time educator, I had moved in with my family. They had purchased a house in Aurora, Colorado. So I had been living with them. I figured, hey, my family as my landlord is probably a better idea. So I was living with them, and this is actually a very common occurrence for artists and so many other individuals to stay with family members because rent is just way too outrageous, right? And so I was living with them. And the shutdowns began to happen all across the nation. Schools began to go remote. And as an artist, I lost all of my gigs for the rest of 2020. So this started in March. And it was a very important chunk of change for my financial stability as an artist. All my university gigs, my keynote addresses, all of that disappeared. And so I was stuck with just this part-time job at this halfway house facility. And so at some point I began to realize, like, the rest of 2020 is going to be really rough if I can't find better financial standing. So I decided to leave that halfway house facility, the part-time gig, and go back into the classroom full-time. And luckily, I was able to land a position at Empower Community High School in Aurora, Colorado. Very liberatory pedagogy, very forward-thinking administration. And so now I'm there as a full-time high school ethnic studies and English language arts teacher. And I tell this story because when we think about when we think about the housing crisis, when we think about budget crisis, when we think about COVID-19 and all the impacts that it's had across the state, in Denver and Aurora, uh, I think as an artist, it's important that I bring up that when we think of solutions, we have to keep in mind the populations that are being most adversely affected by everything that's going on. And one of the populations that no one's really talking about are the artists, right? Those who suffered the hit of the gig economy. That's one population. Another population that we definitely have to think about are our students. As a high school teacher, it is clear that the state of education right now is impacting them in many negative ways. A lot of our students are stuck at home on that Zoom life, and it's literally messing with their mental and emotional stability. And we see it in class, and we have constant conversations about it. Many of these students' families are going through financial crisis. A couple of our students have been evicted from their homes, right? And this is happening, and we need to include these populations in our discussions. Another, of course, population that gets left out of the discussion often is those who are incarcerated, right? And those who are in rehabilitation facilities. And so it's just it's very broad and deep. And I would just like us to kind of remember that it's this broad and this deep and this important. And to kind of frame it further, I'd like to do a poem in closing that was inspired by my time at the halfway house. And this poem is called Halfway House. I kind of suck with titles, so if y'all can help me with that, that'd be great. So, a halfway house is a facility where released prisoners live and learn to reintegrate back into society. I teach classes at a halfway house for men, 200 residents, gangsters, recovering drug addicts, some men old enough to be my grandpa, some young enough to be the little bro I never had. People ask, are you ever intimidated? I ask them if they've ever seen guilt beg for a second chance. Ever seen visiting hours on Sunday when children hug their father to remind him he's forgiven for his absence? Ever seen a mother hold her son's hand like he never found those needles? I like this image of forgiveness. It's a little more tangible than a Hail Mary. Priests sit with convicts and offer prayer. I sit and offer suggestions for a better resume. And I get it. Why sympathize with criminals? You hear halfway house and think, good, keep those animals contained. I hear halfway house and I remember your upbringing might predict how far you fall. Young boys raised in poverty might make poor decisions. Sometimes the grave is dug before you learn to use a shovel. I like this version of digging yourself out. Men attending therapy, taking classes, working towards a GED. I make these men write letters to loved ones. I tell them, promise you'll prove you're more than your mistakes. When you hit rock bottom, find a ladder with a heartbeat. They write about their children. They admit missing their kids' first words is a life sentence. How heavy it is to know someone so precious is suffering for your stupidity. This room full of sinners who learned the jury is a church choir. Hell only exists because God couldn't forgive one angel. I don't expect America to welcome back its damned. I work with the bad news you'd rather not read about. And so you miss the most important headline of all. System already fractured, falling through the cracks. And I'm not making excuses for poor decisions. I'm just saying, I know what it's like to feel lost, to be found by brotherhood, convinced love is measured by how much I break. My OGs never taught me some things can't be fixed. I learned the difference between a pistol and a needle is whose blood it draws. Some of us slip through the cracks. Some of us are lucky enough to hold on to the edge. We learn to look past the arrest. We ask, what tied your hands in the first place? People talk about forgiveness. They forget those who need it most. They say, don't your work feel like a waste of time? And I say, nope. I walk into that halfway house and I square up. I tell these men, you made bad choices, homie, but you're alive enough to make better ones. Maybe it's called halfway because you're somewhere between nothing left and finding a way back home.